Good afternoon. Hi, Bobby. Great to see you. Hi, Veronica. Hi, Adriana. And Crystal and Lucy. Welcome. Another minute or so, see if anyone else joins us. How's everyone doing on a Monday? Busy Monday. I hope if you are enjoying lunch, that you're having a nice lunch break while absorbing some learning. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Francine. Great to see you. We'll just take a moment here for a transitional moment. So take this time to take a deep breath, maybe go warm up your coffee if you're a coffee drinker, or a tea, or grab some water. Just a moment to breathe, whatever you need, because many of us are enjoying lunch at this time or coming from one thing to the next. So just like little ones, adults need transition time too. So just take a moment to stretch, breathe, do whatever you need. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed that transitional moment, even just to take a drink or grab a snack, whatever you needed to fuel your body, to fill your cup, and allow yourself to be present today. Okay, so the exciting topic of volunteerism in early childhood. We are going to dive into that in just a moment. Um, just acknowledging and starting off by saying most of our programs, if not all of our programs that we work for within the early childhood system, whether it be education, pre-K, Head Start, preschool, childcare, home visiting, early intervention, infant early childhood mental health, we all work for programs that rely on volunteerism, whether it's volunteerism from our community members, parents, or even co-workers within that team. Sometimes we have outreach events and we may need to volunteer for that as a member of a team of a program, or we have other events that are larger scale that we need a little bit more support. Sometimes it's as simple as we love to welcome parents and grandparents and community members into our centers to read to our little ones, and childcare centers and education, and so much more. So we really do rely on a network of volunteers to do our job every single day. So it's important that we talk about volunteerism. We also, in many communities across the state, have coalitions, early childhood coalitions. And beyond that, other coalitions such as 100% behavioral health initiatives, or coalitions, and also health coalitions through our Department of Health. And that work solely relies on volunteerism to move forward the initiatives within our counties and our communities. So it's really important that we touch upon this, and it looks a little different than it has many years ago. So as we dive into the presentation, we'll have some opportunities to have some discussion. I want to hear from you all and learn from you all. Yeah, please feel free to leave your camera on, turn it off if you're eating lunch or you need to step away for a moment, restroom break. But always, we love to have your engagement, whether you come off mute and participate in discussion or in the chat. Shoot us an emoji now and again. We love to have that engagement too. So very open and flexible, and encourage you all to participate and ask questions at any time. All right, so let's dive in. Share my screen. All right. Volunteerism in early childhood. Small acts, big impact. We do make a big impact in the work that we do within early childhood, in our communities, and our families and young children. And when we engage in volunteerism, even if it's something small, simple, like a share on social media about an event, it does make a big impact. So I wanted to start out by just thanking you all with deep gratitude for joining us today on our virtual learning series of volunteerism in early childhood, but also welcoming the folks, whether you've been thinking about volunteering or you have done some volunteering in the past or you currently do. We really want to extend our gratitude because without you all, the work cannot move forward. We in the nonprofit world and the early childhood world rely on volunteerism to engage our community and move the work forward. So a huge thank you and gratitude for your time today and your commitment to serving our state's youngest and their families. So what is volunteerism? So it's any opportunity that we have to donate our time or efforts into community acts. That can also be on an individual basis, that you do some volunteering on your own without even a group. But likely and usually we do join other folks of volunteers to impact community efforts. In the past, I've had roles as a volunteer coordinator, as well as I've worked in early childhood education, a Head Start program, early intervention, and supported in the home visiting world also. And all of those areas rely on volunteerism. And without a huge effort from parents and community members, my Head Start Center would not have been thriving. Without my team volunteering for outreach, for early intervention, we would have not been able to reach as many families to tell them about the services that we offered without our volunteerism efforts. And volunteer coordinating within a nonprofit, depending on how large the nonprofit is this whole full-time effort of just coordinating and engaging and recruiting volunteers. So not only that, I really do try to have some sort of volunteering engaged in my life and with my family as well at most times of my life. So, but we'll talk about that as well because our capacity ebbs and flows. So volunteerism, here we are, the science behind it. It actually benefits us to volunteer. It counteracts the effects of stress. It helps us feel like we're a part of something bigger and we're a part of bigger things within our community and making community impacts. Again, moving to having positive social impacts and building relationships within your community. So making those meaningful connections. And sometimes we can acquire skills. So whether we're assisting a program, nonprofit in office volunteerism, or maybe we're working for Habitat for Humanity and we're learning how to literally build homes and carpentry skills and anywhere in between. So know that adding volunteer work on your resume is valid and really a great thing to add to your resume, but also those skills that you acquire within the volunteer work. Sometimes we're even supporting with budgets or, maintaining inventories and things like that with our volunteer work if we're maybe working at a food bank or something like that. And also, it can increase our cognitive function. So there are many benefits to engaging in volunteer work to us personally, but it has changed over the years, especially if you think about, say, the last 5 years. And maybe some of you can speak to that as well, of how maybe you've seen in your community or your programs how volunteerism has ebbed and flowed over the past few years. So the US Census Bureau and AmeriCorps reported a 7% decline since 2019 to 2021. Of course, we can attribute much of that decline to the pandemic, but also that decline, it appears that it's still continuing to trend. Only about 23% of Americans volunteered in 2023. And US News and Report reports a significant decline in volunteerism overall. So what is going on? What does it seem to you all that it's a little bit more difficult to engage folks within your programs or your communities or families that you work with in volunteerism? And it seems to be sometimes, we're asking ourselves, how can we engage more volunteers and how can we motivate people to want to volunteer, whether it be in a community effort we're a part of or within our professional work. So we have to really stop for a moment, just take a pause and acknowledge what has happened and what has changed for us over the past few years. I can take a moment to reflect upon how the past few years has impacted me as well. We have been through a global trauma, experiencing a global pandemic. And sometimes we don't always get the opportunity to pause and acknowledge how much that has changed us and affected us and impacted us. The truth is, you never return to being who you remember before life was turned upside down. But you can embrace who you are meant to become in the turnaround. So the fact that we have all experienced this in different levels, many of us lost loved ones and friends. Many of us experienced becoming sick ourselves. We are resilient and we are creative as human beings. And we can continue to move forward, but it looks a little different. And we all have changed. Many of us in the early childhood world have had many trainings and professional development and experiences surrounding trauma. And we know that when a child experiences trauma from neuroscience or an adult, a human being, that it literally changes our DNA. It changes our brain patterns, our neural or neural pathways. Trauma literally changes us. And so I invite you to think about how not only the past few years has changed you, maybe also shifted some of your priorities And so time and capacity may seem a little different versus in 2019 or 2016. Maybe also on top of that, things change in our lives. Maybe since then, I'm now a grandparent, and my life has shifted somewhat, or my priorities have shifted in some way. Maybe I got a puppy. Maybe I moved. There are life changes that happen that also shift our time and capacity. Maybe I started a new job. Maybe I decided to go back to school, or I'm in school. Maybe I'm taking an extra course and now my capacity is a little bit more limited. And so I just invite you to think about yourself first, do a little bit of a self-reflection and just ask yourself how things might have changed for you over the years. Especially when we step into that space of, gosh, I don't know how to engage folks. So start with thinking about how life might have changed for you in the past few years and impacted your time and capacity. And then we can move forward to understanding as a collective how we all might be feeling, and what new strategies we can engage in versus what we've relied on in the past to engage volunteers. Volunteerism ebbs and flows. There may be a time in your life where you have lots of extra time to engage in an effort, but then something shifts in your life. And that's okay. So just a couple of years ago, I was really engaged in a small nonprofit community effort, and I really still believe in the mission and the work that that nonprofit is doing. But I had a death in my family, and leading up to that my loved one became increasingly ill, and I was supporting with managing some of her care. And then after she had passed, I then was supporting with the arrangements and of course her power of attorney. And so things really shifted for me where I was volunteering almost every weekend. It was just such a great program. I really, learned so much and got so much fulfillment out of it myself. And it brought me lots of opportunities to engage in leadership activities, even grant writing and things like that I love to do within that program. But something shifted in my life, and I had to pull back from that a bit. And so that's hard to do. It's hard for us to do that and not feel really guilty. And then sometimes it's really hard for the nonprofit or the program that you're working with, even if it's a for-profit, to function moving forward without that key player or key group of players. And so we have to understand, though, that we are human and we have lives, and it's okay. So have compassion for yourself if you have to pull back a little, or maybe you attend a meeting monthly and you're really involved in this, say a board or this coalition or community engagement group, and then you have to miss a couple of months. Have some self-compassion for yourself. And then with that, if we're a part of these groups that seek volunteers, let's have compassion for our volunteers too, because we understand that life happens and that volunteerism ebbs and flows. And, it could be as simple as volunteerism is something I do on my spare time, and my interests may have shifted a bit. And that's okay too. And maybe I'm now with a different group or doing something else, and that's okay. Or maybe I volunteer in the political scene, and now, the election is coming up, and so I have to pull back from this. So there's many opportunities and spaces and places to volunteer in our communities and to support good social justice work. So just remember to have compassion with yourself and others. Okay, so I'm gonna leave these up for just a moment, but then we'll come back, we'll share out as a larger group some of your reflections on some of the previous slides that I just mentioned, and also these questions. So thinking about do you volunteer? Maybe what do you like about it? What are some challenges? I'll also remind us of the questions too, so you don't have to memorize them. Where do you volunteer? What are some of the opportunities in your community? And do you find that some folks in do you find some of the same folks in the same circles? So that's definitely something we see a lot, especially in communities. All right, so any thoughts with those questions or just even the information that's already been shared? Does anyone here volunteer?
Well, I've never volunteered, Lindsay. Well, I volunteer at church. Um, that's been my only experience. And like you said, life has shifted for me, and I find I have a lot more time now. So that's why I'm here, because I just want to learn about how to get in connected, like how to do this, because it's been on my heart. Like, go volunteer, go find some time to, do something. So that's my only experience.
Great point, Bobby. I was kind of pointing out life shifts and sometimes we have to pull back from volunteering, but sometimes life shifts and it opens up ample time for volunteerism. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I used to volunteer like you, Bobby, in the church and that, and then I had a bigger fulfillment. So I wanted to volunteer in the school where I live and reside. Just I'm like I'm working very hard not to name the school. So in the school, in the system where I live. And it was a process. Like they don't just want John Doe helping. They want you to get the whole shebang, like the background check, the fingerprints to make sure you're
Good point.
not safe.
Right.
So it was, for me, it was disheartening because it took 6 months to get a background check. It took $65. It took, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help. I don't have my background check. And I was like, at the end of the day, I didn't want to do it anymore. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
but I understand the process, but it's like, so I just can't help all the goodness of my heart. So it just made, I'm a qualified volunteer within the school where in the county I reside in. But it was very disheartening. Like, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
do it anymore. You say you need
Yes.
help, and it wasn't the state where we reside, the system that does the fingerprints. It wasn't them, it was the person that's in charge. It didn't have help to process the application. So it was just like, you want help. And it was just, so now I do it just a little bit, but it was still at the beginning. It was very, but I loved reading to the littles. I loved volunteering my time on playground duty. I would love having kindergarten drama in my life.
That's great. And you know
But
how much the educators really enjoy that support because they have lots of things to catch up on or set up for the next activities. So that is a wonderful place to volunteer. But
yeah,
I totally understand how frustrating that can be if our organizations that really need volunteers and rely on them don't have the systems in place to set up to support onboarding and getting volunteers started. But like you said, we understand why it's important to have background checks and be around our little ones and be in those systems. But what could we do to support volunteers, to kind of help that process move along and maybe so we're not having to pay for those things out of pocket too.
yeah. Because that was expensive. It's not that they're paying me bad. Like, so it's good for the next 5 years, but life changed.
Yeah.
I got a new job and now I can't volunteer as much. Is
Hmm.
my heart still in it? Yeah, because I miss those littles.
Yeah, definitely. Don't forget to have compassion for yourself and know that maybe there'll be a shift in some way, shape, or form in the next few years that you can get back into hanging out with those little ones. They're so fun. Or maybe you find another opportunity. But those were such good points, y'all. You know, how are we supporting our volunteers to get them started and onboarding? Is it a frustrating process? Because if we're trying to recruit volunteers, we wouldn't be as lucky always to find a Lucy that's going to hang out through the process and continue on, because many of us would say, oh gosh, I don't know that I have the money for the background check, or I don't have the time and I need to kind of move on. So thanks for bringing that up for sure. That's a great point to think about. Checking our systems, how are they? So Lucy, you said some wonderful things too about what you like about it. You loved the time on the playground and you loved hanging out with the little ones. Anyone else do some volunteer work that they enjoy, and what are some things they might like about it?
I'll say, hi, I'm Francine. I do volunteer work with the Community Partnership for Children in Grant County. And we work indirectly trying to start daycares, child cares, and home care centers. So we're basically in support of the support systems. And it really has taken off, but it's like you said, it's a slow rolling train. You know, we rely a lot on volunteers, and a lot of us, we have kids, and so having to take the kids along on the, we do things at the park and set up booths and try to support other community agencies. But a lot of what it comes down to is our own obligations. So that there's always the mom guilt because I ditched the kids to an event. And then there's the event guilt that I had to stay with the kids and I didn't help this coalition, or,
Yes.
So it's always being stuck in the middle. I want to help everybody at the same time. And it's just simply not possible.
There's only one of us, right? We all need at least 5 of us to function with our work, our family, or the things we'd love to do. Francine, thank you so much for being vulnerable, sharing that realness of, sometimes the guilt that comes along with, I want to do this, but I can't, and I want to do this, but I can't. And that other piece of the speed of the work. So sometimes when we have to rely on a large volunteer base, the work doesn't always move as quickly as we may like. And also keeping in mind, again, that self-compassion and compassion for others, social justice work takes time. And another really important thing that you just pointed out too is that volunteers often support the gaps that other programs, other supports, other systems are missing or don't quite have funding for, or need a little bit of support and help with. So that's how important volunteer work is. That's a really, really great point. Sometimes positions and funding have been developed surrounding volunteer work. So a perfect example is our early childhood coalitions. There were several across the state, and we didn't quite have funded positions for coordinators. Some of our early childhood coalitions were receiving funding through other streams of money, like grants and things that they were seeking on their own. But eventually, our early childhood education and care department recognized the importance of these coalitions and the work in the communities, and they were able to structure a system that funded a coordinator. So this started with volunteer work in several coalitions across our state, and now we have funding going into these counties and into these positions, and so that's how big the work is, that volunteers were filling the gaps of where the system didn't have a system for yet. And that designed the work moving forward. It's mind-blowing how big volunteer work is, right? And sometimes we think, oh gosh, it's just an hour of my time. It's not a big deal. I really didn't do much, but you really do. Small, but big impacts. So we talked about some of the challenges already too. That was one of the questions. If you think of any other challenges, definitely throw them in the chat too, because it's important for us to be aware of the challenges and barriers when it comes to building anything, let alone a volunteer network, because then we all can learn from it and we all can think about better and more supportive systems, like we're talking about the background check that Lucy experienced that process. Because that is definitely something we want to be more supportive of in our onboarding and recruitment of our volunteers. So our next question was, where do you volunteer? And also, what are some opportunities in your community that you can think of or that you currently volunteer in?
Lindsay, I'll chime in a little bit. So I can relate with what, and I'm trying to remember who said it. Maybe Adriana said that she is looking now at this point to get more involved in volunteering. And I felt the same, like I went through, we all went through COVID and it was kind of like, okay, everybody stepped back and everything. And now it's like, okay, you know what? I want to get out more. I want to do more volunteering and that kind of thing. But I want to also be, what do I want to say? Mindful of who needs volunteers. And so I'm also concerned about going through the process of, the whole thing, like Lucy said, I can volunteer with the schools on, when I have downtime or something, but you go through that whole process, you pay for the background check and everything. And is that really an area that needs volunteers right now? Or is there something else that I could be doing that's like, oh, wait a minute, they, maybe at a elderly home or something, something like a beehive home or something like that, where they might need more assistance. And so I don't want to go through the whole process. And I just wonder, is there something where you can look up and see, okay, what's the rate of volunteerism? Do the schools have, the parents and everybody that volunteer more so they don't need it as much? And I know everybody needs volunteers, but I want to be a little bit selective in, the direction that I take.
Oh, Veronica, you just sparked an idea, a volunteer like resource network, where like in your county or state where you as an organization can sign up. If you need volunteers, and us as volunteers that are seeking work could, maybe go on and look at all of these places that are potential opportunities for us to volunteer in. And like you said too, who needs what? If this place, only needs one volunteer and they have 25 and this place has 0, and they really need some support, maybe I would like to start there.
And like at what
Another idea.
times, weekends or evenings or, that kind of
Yes,
thing.
yeah.
That's beautiful.
That is so, so important too. What works with our schedules. Yeah, thanks, Veronica. That is so insightful. And now we have another idea of, we have to write a grant for this too.
Right?
Volunteer network. I love that. I was thinking how when my daughter was in Head Start and I started volunteering, I just, felt so supported with the program. I thought, gosh, if there's anything I can do to give back and support the program, I'd like to do that. And of course, Head Starts have their parent policy council, and or you can just volunteer for events or come in to read to the children or help serve lunch or playground duty, whatever you have time for. But I thought that would be a good opportunity for me because it's like a once a month meeting and in the evenings, it would work with my work schedule. And it was just a good opportunity for me to give back to the program any way I could. And that eventually led to me actually becoming employed with the agency. So it can open up so many doors, Bobby, same thing. Once a Head Start parent, always a Head Start parent. And the skills that I acquired with volunteering and speaking and leadership, opportunities for training, it just was so great. But of course, I don't do that any longer because my daughter's now in middle school. So that's another reason that things ebb and flow. Maybe we follow our kids along, volunteering in certain groups and in certain schools as they grow. So we can also spend time with our kiddos. So that's another thing that we do. Our grandchildren or our nieces and nephews, we might follow them along as they move through the years and in school. And how often have we thought about volunteering at a high school? Yeah, I know, right? We're all like, no, thanks.
Yeah, Lindsay, I was just thinking, like, I forgot, like, all the times when my kids were younger. Yeah, like, I did volunteer a lot, I guess. Like, that's where I got my job with Head Start, was I was volunteering for so long. And then when my kids were in sports, I forget about, like, that's volunteering.
Oh, yeah.
And, being the team parent, or, and all those, being on the PTA and all of that stuff. I guess I had just, like, put those, I don't know, maybe I thought of them as duties, like, because I was a parent, like that was my duty to be the teen parent and like be the classroom mom. Like maybe I just thought of that as like, oh, this is my job as their mother to do these. And now I'm like, what does volunteering look like? But yeah, like I didn't even realize I had done all those things till
Oh,
you said
yeah, definitely. So my next question to the group is, if we do volunteer in our communities, do we often see some of the same people in the same circles? Yeah, Lucy, Francine, yeah, Bobby, Veronica, yeah, Bruce. Um, and that, yeah, I would go to like a health council meeting, see the same group of people. Then I'd go to the Early Childhood Coalition meeting, see the same kind of group of people. Then I'd go to a community outreach event and see the same group of people. And so one thing is those people like us are like the heroes of the community because they're like moving so many pieces of the work in our community around and really engaged and really supporting our communities and volunteering and with probably their work, their daytime work as well. But also often we burn ourselves out because we're engaged in so many things, or the same people in the same circles that we're seeing. How often or how long can you really sustain that being involved in everything? We wanna, but we also need to take care of ourselves and we need to have some boundaries and balance in our lives too. And sometimes I'm admitting, sometimes I really want to be there. Not fear of missing out, but I'm like, that sounds fun. I'd love to be there. So I hate to miss out. I have the hate of missing out. Like, oh shucks, like, gosh, I wish there were 5 of me and I could be there. So, yeah, I think we all can relate to that too. And some of us are those people that are in the same circles a lot and putting ourselves out there in a lot of work. So just remember that self-compassion for yourselves too. So back to our slides. And then also if we are volunteer organizations, what do we do to support our volunteers from not getting burnout? All right, so what does volunteerism look like? If we are organizations that encourage volunteering, whether it's parents coming to classrooms or supporting with outreach events, or maybe they're members of a community group that they're supporting with an activity or outreach or community events. Maybe we have specific tasks. Maybe we have a nonprofit that has a farm and we need some weeding and gardening done on our farm, or animals fed, or even just animals petted. How fun is that? So, you know, we as volunteers need to know what the time commitment might look like, what the expectations are, and the support that we'll receive. So we just kind of even talked about that in some ways. And then us as volunteer recruiters for organizations need to be clear on the time commitments, the expectations that we want from folks, and we need to have support in place. So what does the time commitment, like Veronica was just talking about with our now volunteer network resource system we need to develop, you know, is it weekends, evenings? Is it only during the day? You know, what times, what works with my schedules, and how much time commitment does it involve, or how much can I commit to this? And then what are the expectations? What are my roles? What are the job duties? What is the scope of work while I'm there? And then support systems, you know, how long does it take to get my background check if I need a background check? How long, you know, will the agency, nonprofit, or the program pay for that? Some nonprofits and some agencies even have volunteer manuals or policies and procedures. So what does that support look like? Who do I report to? If I become injured, if I need help, if I just have a question. All of these things are really important to think about when we think about volunteering, setting up volunteer networks, and also ourselves as volunteers. So what do you get in return? We talked about how it's skill building. We can put things on resumes. We can make those meaningful connections, build relationships. Of course, collaboration. Sometimes if it's bringing programs together, or I had no idea that your program did that. And, you know, often as a volunteer coordinator, I would meet people that were doing really cool jobs that were like full-time. And I would say, oh my gosh, the work that I do full-time, we can connect. We should really stay in the loop together. Or, oh my gosh, we really need that skill here at our nonprofit. So there were opportunities for collaboration. If you are a network or an organization that seeks volunteers, consider adding volunteers based on their skill set. So sometimes we say, what is it I exactly need? I need a fence built. So I need folks to build a fence. But in that opportunity, when you have a open volunteer base and folks come to you and say, I'm interested in volunteering, having a conversation about their work experience, maybe their education or their past volunteer experience or some of their community work is really valuable, because you may find that you're working at a nonprofit and someone that's just really, you know, supportive of the community might come in, say, hey, I'd like to volunteer, whatever you all need, but you find out that they're, say, a yoga instructor. And then you could use that skill if they were willing to volunteer their time as a yoga instructor for, say, a community event or a parent and family event, caregiver event, or teaching the little ones yoga. So there are ways to build on people's skills to enhance your programs too. So think about not just what you need, but what folks can bring to your programs. Of course, the more we network and connect with folks, we have alignment. And then of course we can avoid those silos sometimes by connecting events. Oh gosh, I have this going on in my community, and oh, we were thinking about doing something like that. Let's actually come together and do that together. And then we can share the families. So by volunteering, I might learn of something, a resource that's out there in the community that families may benefit from. Of course, our networking, like we've talked a lot about already, making connections and building relationships. And of course, the work that we can do in early childhood can support young children and families along with the profession of early childhood, uplifting and empowering our families and our young children and our early childhood professionals. So what are some opportunities in your community to volunteer? Well, many counties across our state have early childhood coalitions or neighboring counties. Many of those coalitions offer their meetings virtually or hybrid too. So even if you're a neighboring community or county, that might be a great opportunity. Of course, school districts, pre-K programs, Head Starts, preschool programs, childcare programs, and childcare centers, maybe libraries or community programs. And beyond that, Veronica brought up working at maybe assisted living facilities or skilled nursing facilities, hospitals, and many other opportunities in our communities, Habitat for Humanity, even just me, myself, going down to the river and picking up trash. There are just so many opportunities to volunteer to support your community and good efforts on the continuum. So some strategies I'd love to share with you all. In addition to thinking about how we recruit, not just thinking about what we need, but rather what can a volunteer bring to enhance our program or our team. And some other strategies that we all have shared along the way. Here are some outline strategies that we can really think about. So identify the needs and the areas that you are needing support in your organization, your community, program, coalition, or your agency that you work for. Identify those needs so that we know how to build a network of volunteers or a team of volunteers to support those needs. So is it, I need a few folks to help me with community outreach events. Or on larger scales, I need a group of people, well, our community needs a group of people to engage in civic leadership that would be willing to become trained and receive professional development, again, more skill building, to speak in Santa Fe at legislation sessions or meet with local decision makers? Is it something that large? Do I need some support in my small nonprofit to write some grants? What does that look like? Or do I need some support with something else over here so it free me up to write some grants? So really thinking about your organizational structure and development and what you're needing support and where those areas are. So it's important, just like we value your time to attend sessions like this for continued learning, to value our volunteers' time and capacity. Again, it's volunteer time. So being understandable and flexible with schedules and whatnot is really important, especially as you attempt to retain your volunteer base or that particular volunteer. Of course, it is always difficult. Take it from me, former volunteer coordinator, when you have certain activities or events scheduled and volunteers don't make it. And so what does that look like? So it is always difficult, but always remembering that it is up to the volunteer to donate their time, literally, and their time and capacity. So having some grace and compassion with that area too, but also maybe strategies to support. Well, I'm expecting 10 volunteers, but I really only need 5. That might be a great strategy to kind of overbook or book in sessions. So if it's, say, a community outreach event, maybe we have a time commitment of you do a shift or a session from 1 to 2 and I'll take 2 to 3. So it's not so much of a large time commitment. So thinking about strategies to support the engagement and motivation and actual volunteer showing up to coming to the actual volunteer coming to your event. So consider software to manage volunteers and their schedules and certain tasks. Because especially if you're managing a large network of volunteers, or thinking about my Head Start program, I had several volunteers coming in at different times and different days. And this person read stories to kiddos. This person helped serve lunches in one classroom. This person was coming for an event. You know, sometimes that can be really hard to manage. So consider something to support managing volunteer time and when they're coming in, different shifts, etc. There are a lot of programs out there like that. And then also there are programs that you can link to your websites, and folks can go onto your website, sign up for volunteer work, and just show up and you just get the notifications. And then there's lots of pieces in between that too. So also considering some of, you know, the folks that we work with in community aren't always tech savvy or have access to computers and internet and things like that. So we also, you know, should think of systems that we can work on if folks come into our office, or outreach for volunteers that doesn't always involve social media or websites. But I found for the volunteer coordination that I was working with, because it was such a large scale opportunity, and many opportunities, but such a large scale operation, that the software really helped. And it helped with my time of reaching out to folks. So they automatically could just sign up for things, where I could set up specific events and they could sign up for shifts or specific duties. And that helped a lot. And then also you can use AI for some of these pieces and software, and also outreach, and of course, management overall of volunteers and their schedules. So just some considerations, or setting up strategies and systems to support you to help manage that is helpful. Sometimes before having those things, I would schedule with a volunteer 3 weeks ago, and she said, hey, I could come in at 1 o'clock to read to the kids. And then I was pulled away to do something else, and I forgot to write it down. And then 3 weeks from now at 1 o'clock, she comes in and I'm like, oh yes, I forgot about you coming in. Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. But I also forgot to let the teacher know, and they didn't build it into their schedule. So having systems, especially when you're wearing multiple hats and roles, to manage and track your volunteers, that was helpful for me. Think about your recruitment messages and ideas on how to recruit volunteers. You know, does it sound like something I'd like to be engaged in? Or does it sound like I'm not really sure what exactly that is? So think about the clarity and your messages that you're using to reach out to your community. Often our nonprofits, our coalitions, the programs we work for do not have extra funds for ads and things like that. But if you did, you know, consider social media ads or something in the paper to reach out to generate interest in volunteering for your organization. I think what was the most successful for me was having a really enthusiastic volunteer that loved volunteering with the agency that I worked with, actually telling others and being an ambassador, so to speak, or building relationships, or talking to folks that they had existing relationships with about their volunteer opportunities and word of mouth. And then I even moved to interviewing some of my volunteers and posting that on social media or our website, just about their experience of volunteering with the agency or the organization that I worked with. And think about occasionally having a survey or checking in with your volunteers every now and again, just testing the temperature now and again. What has your experience been? What has your experience been like volunteering with us? What could we do better about communication? Do you feel like you are really, engaged and making a difference here at our agency, our organization? And thinking about how do we retain volunteers? There are many different things that we can do that are low cost. Do we have some sort of maybe celebration or award ceremony of, volunteer of the year, which I can print off a very low cost certificate for. Thinking about ways that we can really show appreciation, not just once a year, but all of the time. And part of retention of volunteers are the systems that we put in place for communication and support, and building upon the skills that they bring to our programs too. And share the impact of your organization and volunteer work with your community, and just simply what impact overall you have, but without your volunteers, you could not do that. So in a moment, I'm just going to ask, what are some of your takeaways as we close? But here are some of our resources. If you'd like to do some further diving into volunteerism and kind of breaking down the science of that. But what are some takeaways that you're thinking about now with the area of volunteerism in early childhood?
Some takeaways for me is, like you said, to ask what is needed. Because sometimes as adults or as kids, what exactly do you need? And if we're asking kids that, I think we should be able to ask the same of, what exactly do you need? Oh, you need someone to come do playground duty. Oh, you need someone to come do this. Or make copies for me while I do X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. Just being able to advocate for yourself and saying, what exactly do you need? And being able to initiate it and get it done. That's the takeaway I got.
That's a great takeaway. Anyone else?
My takeaway was like with the certificates and the appreciation and the little awards, it really does go a long way. And then also like with welcoming new members to existing groups, because they all bring something different, and finding out what those are always, you don't know what experiences they all come with. So like utilizing their strengths definitely helps, because then they feel like they're not wasting their time and move on to an adventure, or not adventure, but move on to something more fitting for them, their style, but suiting a position to what they already offer. I liked that.
That's wonderful. Strengths-based thinking, how can we build on strengths? How can we build on skills, versus always just getting so caught up in what we need, that deficit, right? And the appreciation and the communication and support go a long way. Consider having volunteer orientations as well, so you can clearly talk about the expectations and your organization, the mission, the vision, and the time commitment, who they report to, where the restroom is, the safety procedures, things like that, are really important to know when we engage in volunteering.
Lindsay, I think all of that is very important, and engaging them before. I love the idea of just talking with them and saying, what are you interested in? What would you like to do? What's your past? What's your profession? We take it for granted, especially with people we know, that we coerce them into volunteering, and they show up and say, instead of saying, what would you like to do? This is what I have to offer. I'm assigning them right away.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's not the best way to do it. What would you like to do? These are the 5 jobs that you'd like to do. And I know it's important to shift so they're not sitting there the whole time. They're going over here and they're moving and they're moving. So they feel like they're, part of it, and they're not getting bored. But you do forget when you're in such a fast-paced environment to just do this, do that, So I love that idea.
That's such a great point, Maria. And we all are in those fast-paced environments, and we all have so many time commitments personally and professionally that sometimes it's hard to make that time to sit down, build relationship, and really talk about how you can build on someone's skills and engage them. But I think that might be part of the key to engaging volunteers is how do I help them to feel fulfilled while they're here and give them autonomy in making decisions. If I'm having a volunteer building day and I need a fence built and I need raised garden beds built and then I need something else over here painted, maybe I let someone choose. Would you like to paint? Would you like to build,
Right.
instead of just assigning and having them being a part of those decisions is really important. Engaging your team, volunteer team in decision making helps them to feel like they're a part of this larger mission and vision.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, it is 1:02. Thank you all for being so engaged and the ideas and things that you all shared. Thank you. Big claps to you all because I've learned so much from you. Thank you again just for your time, for being interested in volunteering, for volunteering currently or in the past or thinking about it in the future. Thank you for the support that you do each and every day to support our little ones and their families across the state. We just value your time so much. I will post a link to the survey in the chat in just a moment, but if anyone has any questions, I'd love to hear those.
Lindsay, I can paste it for you.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. So please do. We'd love to hear your feedback. We want to continue to make our sessions better and better each time we offer them. So again, thank you all for your time. Have a great rest of your week. It's Monday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.